June 6, 1944. Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. 0645 hours. The ramp drops. Salt spray and cordite smoke fill the air. The sound is immense, a wall of noise composed of surf, diesel engines, machine gun fire, and the metallic clang of bullets striking the landing craft hull. Soldiers lurch forward into chest-deep water, heavy with gear, struggling against the current. Above them, tracers arc to the gray dawn like horizontal rain. Men fall, others push forward, and in their hands, wrapped in fingers white with cold and fear, they carry a rifle. It is walnut and steel, 43 inches long, weighing 9.5 pounds. It has a distinctive profile, the smooth wooden stock, the long barrel, the end block clip that feeds from the top. It is the M1 Garand, and in the chaos of that morning, as thousands of American infantrymen wade through blood-tinged surf toward German positions dug into the bluffs, this rifle will prove itself in ways no weapon had before. The Germans, firing from concrete bunkers with their Mauser Kar 98K bolt-action rifles, expect the Americans to fight as other armies have fought, slowly, methodically, one shot at a time. They do not expect what comes next. The Americans reach the seawall. They take cover behind steel obstacles and corpses. An officer signals. The men rise, and then they fire. Not one shot, not two, but 8 rounds in rapid succession. Crack, 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 crack. A sustained, relentless drumbeat of lead that pours into German positions with a speed and volume that defies belief. The Garand semi-automatic action cycles without pause. Pull trigger, fire, automatically eject, automatically chamber the next round. Fire again. No bolt to work. No manual action between shots. Just sustained, accurate fire delivered at a rate 3 times faster than any bolt-action rifle in existence. The Germans, crouched behind MG-42 machine guns and Mauser rifles, suddenly realize they are outgunned by men carrying what they assumed were ordinary infantry weapons. A Wehrmacht veteran, captured weeks later, would tell his interrogators, "We thought they all had machine guns. Every American seemed to fire like a machine gun. We could not keep up." That sound, the rapid percussive staccato of the M1 Garand in action, became the signature American infantry firepower in World War II, and it changed everything. To understand why the M1 Garand was revolutionary, one must first understand what it replaced and what it faced. For centuries, infantry combat had been governed by a brutal arithmetic. Rate of fire versus accuracy, speed versus control. The bolt-action rifle, perfected in the late 19th century, represented a balance. It was accurate, reliable, and powerful, but it was slow. A trained soldier with a bolt-action rifle, whether it was a German Mauser Kar 98K, the British Lee Enfield, or the Soviet Mosin Nagant, could fire perhaps 15 aimed shots per minute. Each shot required the soldier to work the bolt, lift the handle, pull it back to eject the spent casing, push it forward to chamber a new round, push the handle down to lock the breech, then reacquire the target and fire. It was a mechanical rhythm, ingrained through endless drill, but imposed a ceiling on firepower. Every army in World War II understood this limitation. The solution was specialization. Infantry squads were built around machine guns. The real source of firepower, the rifleman, existed to protect the machine gunner, to carry ammunition, to provide security. The rifle was a secondary weapon. Fire and maneuver doctrine assumed that the machine gun would suppress the enemy while riflemen advanced. The individual soldier's ability to deliver sustained fire was considered less important than his ability to operate as part of a team. The United States rejected this doctrine. American military planners, studying the lessons of World War I, concluded that the individual rifleman was being underutilized. If every soldier could fire as rapidly as a machine gunner, the entire squad's firepower would multiply exponentially. The Army would not need to rely on specialized weapons teams. Every infantryman would be a source of overwhelming firepower. This was a radical idea, one that required a radical weapon. Enter John Garand. John Cantius Garand was a Canadian-born firearms designer who immigrated to the United States and went to work at the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, he labored on a singular problem: How to create a semi-automatic rifle that was reliable, accurate, powerful enough to fire the standard .30-06 cartridge, and simple enough for mass production and field maintenance. Dozens of designers had tried. All had failed. Semi-automatic actions were finicky. They jammed in mud, froze in cold, broke under stress. The military needed a rifle that could survive being dropped in sand, submerged in water, and fired thousands of times without malfunction. Garand's solution was elegant. He used a gas-operated system in which a small amount of propellant gas was diverted from the barrel into a piston located beneath it. The gas drove the piston backward, which in turn drove the bolt carrier, extracting the spent casing and chambering a new round from the end block clip. The entire cycle took a fraction of a second. The rifle reloaded itself. The soldier simply pulled the trigger. In 1936, after years of testing, the U.S. Army adopted the M1 Garand as its standard service rifle. It was the first nation in the world to equip its entire infantry with a semi-automatic rifle. The decision was controversial. Critics argued the rifle was too complex, too heavy, too expensive. They pointed out that the end-block clip system, which held 8 rounds and ejected automatically when empty, was wasteful and made a distinctive ping sound that could alert enemies when a soldier was reloading. Traditional bolt-action rifles, they argued, were proven reliable and sufficient, but the advocates won. And when American soldiers landed in North Africa in 1942, then Italy in 1943, then France in 1944, the M1 Garand went with them, and it proved the advocates right. The first German soldiers to face the M1 Garand in significant numbers did so in the hedgerows of Normandy in June and July 1944. The Bocage country was a nightmare of narrow lanes, dense vegetation, and earthen embankments topped with thick hedgerows that turned every field into a fortress. Visibility was measured in yards. Combat was intimate, sudden, and lethal. Soldiers stumbled into each other at close range, often without warning. In this environment, rate of fire became the decisive factor. A German infantryman, armed with his Kar 98K, could fire a shot, work the bolt, and fire again in about 4 seconds if he was skilled and calm. That gave him perhaps 2 or 3 shots before an enemy closed the grenade range or forced him to take cover. An American soldier with an M1 Garand could fire 8 shots in the same 4 seconds. He could pour fire into a hedgerow, suppressing an enemy position, while his squad maneuvered. He could engage multiple targets in rapid succession without breaking his shooting stance or losing sight picture. The tactical implications were profound. German squads, built around the MG-34 or MG-42 machine gun, relied on that weapon to deliver sustained firepower, while riflemen provided security and acted as ammunition bearers. But when a machine gunner was killed or suppressed, the squad's firepower collapsed. The riflemen, armed with slow bolt actions, could not fill the gap. American squad, by contrast, had 8 men each capable of delivering semi-automatic fire. Lose the bar gunner, and the squad still had devastating firepower. The M1 Garand distributed lethality across the entire unit. German after-action reports from Normandy reflect this asymmetry. One Wehrmacht officer wrote, "The American infantry fires with a rapidity that suggests automatic weapons. Our own riflemen cannot match this volume. We are forced to rely entirely on machine guns, and when these are knocked out, we are at a severe disadvantage." Another captured German soldier, interrogated by American intelligence, described the psychological impact. "You hear them coming through the hedgerow. You fire your rifle, work the bolt, fire again. But they're firing continuously. Bang, 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 bang. And you realize it will kill you before you can reload. So you run or you surrender." This was not hyperbole. Studies conducted by the U.S. Army during and after the war concluded that the M1 Garand gave American riflemen a 3-to-1 advantage in effective firepower over their German counterparts. 3-to-1. That ratio, multiplied across tens of thousands of soldiers, translated into a crushing tactical superiority. The Germans tried to respond. They accelerated development of their own semi-automatic rifles, the Gur 41, and later the Gur 43. But these weapons were produced in limited numbers, were mechanically unreliable, and arrived too late to change the balance. By 1944, the Wehrmacht was short of everything: fuel, ammunition, replacement troops. Producing millions of semi-automatic rifles was beyond their industrial capacity. They were forced to continue issuing bolt-action Mausers to the vast majority of their infantry, even as they faced an enemy where every soldier carried a weapon superior in rate of fire. The Sturmgewehr 44, often cited as the first true assault rifle, was developed partly in response to the M1 Garand. It fired an intermediate cartridge, was fully automatic, and represented a leap forward in infantry weapon design. But it came too late and in too few numbers. Fewer than 450,000 were produced, and most went to elite units on the Eastern Front. The average German soldier in Normandy, in the Hürtgen Forest, in the Ardennes, still carried a Kar 98K, and he was outgunned. The Japanese faced a similar dilemma. Their standard rifle, the Arisaka Type 38 or Type 99, was a robust bolt-action weapon, but it suffered from the same rate-of-fire limitations as a Mauser. Japanese infantry tactics emphasized marksmanship, discipline, and aggressive night attacks. But when American Marines and soldiers, armed with M1 Garands, met those attacks with rapid, sustained fire, the results were catastrophic for the Japanese. On Guadalcanal, at Tarawa, on Saipan and Peleliu and Iwo Jima, the M1 Garand allowed American troops to deliver defensive fire at a rate that shredded banzai charges and ambushes. One Marine Corps report from the Battle of Iwo Jima noted, "The M1 rifle's rate of fire proved decisive in repelling multiple enemy infiltration attempts. Individual Marines were able to engage and eliminate multiple targets in rapid succession, something impossible with bolt-action weapons." The Japanese, like the Germans, had no effective counter. They could not produce semi-automatic rifles in meaningful quantities. Their industrial base was strained to breaking. So they fought with what they had, and they died in staggering numbers against an enemy whose rifles fired faster, reloaded faster, and killed faster. But the M1 Garand was more than a tactical advantage. It was a symbol, one that encapsulated the deeper material and ideological differences between the United States and its enemies. The rifle's very existence was a product of American industrial might. It was a complex, precision-manufactured weapon that required advanced machining, quality steel, and skilled labor. Between 1936 and 1945, the United States produced over 4 million M1 Garands, an astonishing number that no other nation could match. The factories that built the Garand, Springfield Armory, Winchester Repeating Arms, operated on a scale that dwarfed European and Japanese armaments production. They had access to raw materials, electricity, transportation infrastructure, and a workforce that was well-fed, well-paid, and motivated. This was the arsenal of democracy in action. While German factories were bombed, starved of resources, and manned by slave laborers who sabotaged production, American factories ran 3 shifts, 7 days a week, churning out weapons at a pace that seemed almost supernatural to enemy observers. Every M1 Garand that reached the front was a testament to this disparity. It represented not just superior design, but superior society, a nation that could afford to give every soldier the best weapon money could buy. The soldiers who carried the Garand understood this, at least intuitively. They knew they were better armed than their enemies. They knew their supply lines were secure, that replacement rifles and ammunition would arrive on schedule. This knowledge bred confidence. The M1 Garand became a talisman, a physical embodiment of American power. Soldiers gave their rifles names, cared for them obsessively, wrote home about them. One infantryman wrote to his family, "This rifle is my best friend. It has saved my life more times than I can count. I trust it more than I trust anything." For the enemy, the Garand had the opposite effect. It was a demoralizing reminder of the material imbalance they faced. Captured German and Japanese soldiers frequently mentioned the M1 Garand in interrogations, describing it with a mix of respect and envy. They knew that when they faced American infantry, they were not just facing better-trained soldiers or superior tactics. They were facing a systemic advantage rooted in industrial capacity, technological innovation, and economic abundance. One German officer, captured in late 1944, summed it up bitterly. "You have everything. Rifles that fire themselves. Artillery that never stops. Trucks, planes, tanks. Endless. We have courage, but you have steel. How could we win? He could not. And the M1 Garand was one reason why. The rifle's dominance was not without flaws or criticisms. The N-block clip system, while innovative, had drawbacks. The clip held only 8 rounds, fewer than the 10-round stripper clips used in bolt-action rifles. The distinctive ping sound when the clip ejected was widely believed to alert enemies that the soldier was reloading, though post-war studies found little evidence this actually happened in combat. The battlefield was too loud, too chaotic. More significantly, the rifle could not be easily topped off. Once loaded, the soldier had to fire all 8 rounds before the clip ejected, and a new one could be inserted. This could be wasteful in situations where only a few shots were needed. The rifle was also heavy. At 9.5 pounds unloaded, it was a burden on long marches, especially in the Pacific where heat and humidity made every ounce feel like 10. Some soldiers complained about the rifle's length, which made it unwieldy in close quarters or jungle fighting. The Garands with stock could crack if the rifle was used as a club or dropped on hard surfaces. But these were minor quibbles compared to the rifle's overwhelming advantages. And soldiers adapted. They learned to reload quickly, to manage the clip system, to maintain the rifle even in the worst conditions. Armorers developed field techniques for repairing cracked stocks, replacing worn gas cylinders, and cleaning fouled actions. The M1 Garand, despite its complexity, proved remarkably reliable. It functioned in the frozen forests of the Ardennes, in the mud of the Italian mountains, in the coral dust of Pacific atolls, and in the desert sands of North Africa. Field reports from every theater praised the rifle's performance. A survey of infantry officers in Europe found that over 90% rated the M1 Garand as superior to any comparable weapon. Soldiers who captured German or Japanese rifles as souvenirs invariably returned to their Garands. The rifle inspired a loyalty rare in military equipment. General George S. Patton, never one for understatement, called the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. This was hyperbole, perhaps, but it reflected a widespread belief among American commanders that the Garand gave their troops an edge that translated directly into battlefield success. Patton understood that wars were won by killing the enemy faster than they could kill you. The M1 Garand did exactly that. The rifle's impact extended beyond the battlefield. It influenced post-war military doctrine and weapons development worldwide. After witnessing the effectiveness of the M1 Garand, every major military began developing its own semi-automatic or fully automatic infantry rifles. The Soviet Union introduced the SKS, then the AK-47. The British experimented with the EM-2 and later adopted the FNFL. The Germans, rebuilding their military in the 1950s, adopted the G3. All of these weapons trace their conceptual lineage back to the M1 Garand's core insight. The individual rifleman should be a source of sustained firepower, not a secondary element in the squad. The Garand also shaped American military identity. It became iconic, a symbol of the World War II infantryman, as recognizable as the steel helmet or the olive drab uniform. Photographs of soldiers raising the flag on Iwo Jima, wading ashore at Normandy, or marching through liberated Paris almost always feature the M1 Garand. The rifle became inseparable from the image of the American GI, the citizen soldier who fought not for conquest but for freedom, armed with the tools of democracy. This symbolism was not accidental. The United States invested heavily in propaganda that emphasized American technological and material superiority. The M1 Garand fit perfectly into this narrative. It was modern, efficient, powerful, everything the fascist and militarist enemies were not. Newsreels showed soldiers firing the Garand in training, extolling its virtues. War bond posters featured the rifle. It was marketed, both to the American public and to the world, as evidence that democracy produced better weapons because it produced better societies. And there was truth in this. The Garand's existence was made possible by free markets, by innovation driven by competition and merit, by an industrial base that operated on voluntary labor rather than coercion. The rifle embodied the very ideals the United States claimed to fight for. The German and Japanese soldiers who faced the M1 Garand in combat did not, of course, philosophize about its symbolism in the moment. They were too busy trying to survive. But in the aggregate, Over years of grinding attrition, the rifle contributed to a psychological erosion that paralleled the physical destruction of Axis armies. German soldiers learned to dread American infantry attacks. They knew that when the Americans came, they would come with firepower that could not be matched by bolt-action rifles alone. This knowledge affected morale, made soldiers hesitant, encouraged surrender. One Wehrmacht soldier, writing in a diary later recovered from his body, noted, "We hear them before we see them. The sound of their rifles, so fast, so many, it sounds like thunder. Our own rifles sound like toys by comparison." Japanese soldiers, steeped in a warrior culture that glorified individual combat prowess, found the M1 Garand particularly demoralizing. Bushido taught that spirit could overcome material disadvantage, that willpower and discipline could defeat superior weaponry. But the Garand challenged this belief. No amount of courage could close the gap when an American soldier could fire 8 rounds in the time it took a Japanese soldier to fire 2. The rifle imposed a brutal material reality that ideology could not overcome. This demoralization contributed to the collapse of enemy resistance in the war's final months. By 1945, German and Japanese soldiers increasingly surrendered or deserted rather than face the American war machine. The M1 Garand was one piece of that machine, a piece that demonstrated, every time it fired, that the Axis powers have been outthought, outproduced, and outfought. The soldiers who carried the M1 Garand through the war returned home as veterans, and many kept their rifles or bought surplus models in the post-war years. The rifle became a cherished heirloom, passed down through generations. Veterans taught their sons and grandsons to shoot with Garands, recounting stories of the weapon's reliability, its accuracy, its life-saving firepower. The rifle became a physical link to the war, a tangible reminder of sacrifice and victory. Collectors and historians prize the M1 Garand today. Original wartime examples, stamped with arsenal marks and serial numbers, sell for thousands of dollars. Shooting enthusiasts restore them, compete with them in matches, celebrate their design. The rifle has transcended its utilitarian origins to become an artifact of cultural memory, a symbol not just of World War II, but a particular moment in American history when industrial might and democratic values aligned to defeat totalitarianism. And perhaps that is the deepest truth the M1 Garand represents. That material abundance, when harnessed for just purposes, becomes a moral force. The rifle was not just a tool for killing. It was a tool for liberation. It armed men who freed concentration camps, who stopped genocides, who dismantled empires. The Garand's rapid fire was not mere technical superiority. It was a sound of democracy defending itself, of free peoples refusing to submit, of a nation that believed its citizens deserved the best weapons because they were fighting for the best ideals. The Germans and Japanese could not counter the M1 Garand because they could not counter what it represented. They could not match American production because their systems were built on conquest and slavery. They could not inspire the same loyalty in their soldiers because their causes were unjust. They could not innovate at the same pace because their society suppressed dissent and punished failure. The M1 Garand was a rifle, but it was also an argument made in steel and walnut that freedom worked, that democracy delivered, that the open society would defeat the closed one. And on the beaches, in the forests, across the islands and the deserts and the frozen plains, that argument was won 8 rounds at a time. In the end, when the smoke cleared and the bodies were counted and the borders redrawn, the soldiers who carried the M1 Garand into battle remembered not just the rifle's technical specifications, but the confidence it gave them. They remembered the sound, that rapid, steady percussion that told them they were not alone, not outgunned, not abandoned by the nation that sent them to fight. One veteran, interviewed decades after the war, said it best, "That rifle made me feel invincible, not because I was stupid or reckless, but because I knew it worked. I knew if I pulled the trigger, it would fire. I knew I could hit what I aimed at. I knew I could fire faster than any enemy I faced. That knowledge made all the difference. It made me believe I could win. And so I did." Millions of others felt the same. They carried the Garand across continents, through the worst war in history, and brought it home again. And though the rifle was eventually replaced by newer designs, the M14, the M16, it never faded from memory. It remained fixed in the American imagination as the rifle that won the war. The Germans could not counter it because they had nothing to match it, not in firepower, not in production, not in the philosophy embodied. They fought bravely, desperately, fanatically, but they fought with bolt-action rifles against an enemy armed with semi-automatic ones, and that mismatch, repeated in a million firefights across the globe, tipped the balance. The M1 Garand did not win the war alone, but it gave the men who did win the war a tool worthy of their courage. It gave them the firepower to make that courage count. And in the annals of military history, that is victory enough.